Welcome to Beyond BIM. Today's episode is a discussion about the evolution of BIM and the transition towards all things new, such as digital twins, modern methods of construction, offsite construction, and AI. I had the pleasure of speaking to none other than David Philp. I'm sure that for listeners in the UK, many will have come across David as a prominent lead figure into the UK BIM mandate. David was seconded into the UK Cabinet Office in 2011 as Head of BIM Implementation and was a key contributor to the UK public sector BIM mandate and has continued to support through his role as Impact Director at Construction Innovation Hub. He was also seconded into the Scottish Future Trust as Chair of the Scottish BIM Delivery Group. With over 25 years in industry, David is a chartered construction manager by background and a global BIM consultancy director for AECOM. His work with BIM has a global reach from UK, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, and even the Baltics. As an Estonian myself, we even share something in common, because David, as it turns out, has even got a digital residency in Estonia. As always, we discuss all things digital, but most importantly, what the penultimate motivation is for policy and government with these transitions. Because of David's experience in the policy realm since the start of it all with BIM Task Group, I thought it was best to get his perspective on the evolution of BIM and discuss where we may be heading. And now, let's hear more directly from David himself. Dave, thanks ever so much for joining us today. I wanted to start off with getting a bit of insight from your perspective on what the current state of BIM in the UK is, and what has the journey to get to this state been like, particularly since the inception of the BIM Task Group and the vision that you guys had at the beginning.
Thank you, Erika, and lovely to be here today. It's I was just thinking about this morning. I think it's hard to believe that we started this journey in the UK over a decade ago. I mean, time has flown. I think sometimes we underestimate how much we've actually came within that decade. And it's interesting if you go back to think about around about 2010, 2011, all we actually had was a hypothesis for BIM. And actually, it was probably less about BIM, it was actually about data. And I was actually thinking about how open, shareable data could actually help us if we start to collaborate better. You know, the question was, could it help us deliver better? Could we do it at lower cost? But also looking in terms of carbon as well. You know, could we be more altruistic in terms of what we're doing? So when we actually looked at the then government construction strategy, it was very much about trying to make a very much transformational change. It was going to test. And actually, I was thinking about it last night. You know, what we were trying to do, I think, was actually start to build lots more data and test data. So it was very much, you know, a data-centric type question within there. And I think through the early pilot projects, we showed that BIM, better quality data, could undoubtedly help us deliver capital projects for less. But the title of today's is obviously Beyond BIM, and I think we've now gone beyond that. We're starting to use that data to test other parts of the life cycle. But let's think about what it was back then. We had hypothesis, but we were also trying to create, remember this is back in terms of trying to create procurement reform back then. We were trying to build it in, to bake it into business cases, into procurement, to do things better. But I think one of the big things was also we were trying to create a pull and a push. Now, the pull was obviously government as a client becoming better at buying and using data. So back to, you know, I'll be unapologetic, it was very much about data within there as well. But it was the same time, it was giving a push to industry. You know, it was starting to think about how we start to level up or upskill in terms of how we use data in our digital tools, and in fact, having to retool as well. But I think one of the big things as well, to look back in terms of that push and pull, and I think it was that sort of nexus of trying to create a behavioural change with there to actually create a partnership between industry and the supply chain within there, and actually think about the dynamics and behaviours of a supply chain that become more efficient and collaborative and working together. So I think we'd be really proud in the UK in terms of what we're doing and how we've actually, where we are now. I think we've got the UK BIM framework, which I think is world class in terms of harmonization with a real focus on information management and actually how we use that data. And if you look at, what we've done, for me, the big part of it is we brought industry together. You look at the work that industry is doing. This is people taking time out their days to, create guidance around there as well. And I think looking back, one of the things we didn't get stuck in the weeds. We had a real clear vision, and we let the supply chain industry actually innovate around about it. We set a direction of travel. And I think we're obviously in that sort of next vector with there as well, as we start to think about digital twins. And I think that was one of the big things when what was BIM Level 2 was always seen as a staging post. It was there, start creating this data, start to be able to use it, and then we could start to build, if you like, the use cases out, start to move from, if you like, a deterministic to much more probabilistic and outcome-based approach for the use of digital twinning.
Yeah, and if we go back and think about the policy changes, what would you say were some of the key lessons when surrounding the BIM policy? And now when we're moving into the stage of having the ISO standard, what will that help achieve? So what are some of the key lessons that you've understood to become necessary for policy around BIM?
Yeah, so I think we've seen lots of policies in the UK. Let's start off with HM government first. And I think one of the things I thought was really important was we didn't have a BIM strategy. A BIM mandate. It was a government construction strategy. It was holistic. It was part of a wider period of reform. We were looking at new forms of contract that were much more collaborative in nature, contractor engagement. We were looking at soft landings, how we start to think about, closing that operational chasm and BIM and the data there. So it was much more holistic in nature, which was really important. It wasn't just, let's go and do BIM. It was actually, let's tie all these things together. Think about procurement. There's going to be much, bringing people together, much more collaborative, and start to create these dynamics within the supply chain. Government soft landings was there to engage the end user, put more focus on outcome. And we had BIM there very much underpinning it through better data and information management. So for me, one of the big things was it wasn't about BIM in isolation. It was bringing all these constellations of key themes together. And up in Scotland, obviously where I live as well, I was lucky enough to chair the Scottish journey within there. And actually Scotland does actually have hard policy. It's a policy item. And one of the things in Scotland was early doors realised that to try and get what was then BIM Level 2, to try and get everybody there, probably was unachievable. Local authorities and such like weren't there yet. So in Scotland, the word was proportionality. How do we get different people? And one of the things the Scottish policy was about, creating a grading to help get everybody onto the digital ramp, get the basics in place, upskill or level up everyone to BIM Level 1, better information management, common data environment, security, and then move within there as well. So about proportionality within there. But I think one of the big things is within the UK, despite the fact we've got, 4 devolved nations, through Centre for Digital Build Britain, we have a Home Nations working group helping bring everybody together, create, innovate, and always trying to move the needle, which I think is fantastic as well. I think one of the big things as well, and I always think, why did I kind of get into this was, I go back actually, it was a report that went out it was a construction excellence report, I'm sure you've read it, Never Waste a Good Crisis. And for me, that was one of the big things at the time as well. We were moving away from, I think, this theme of construction to thinking much more about a built environment within there. And we were starting to look at the value of a whole life approach to our built assets within there. And I think one of the big things is our policies and such like are moving on. We're moving much more to value-based, how we use data for value-based procurements, how we can think about better operation within there. And I think when we think about our built environment, one of the things that's really came out in the recent years is thinking about much more a natural built environment as well. And that's become a key thing, how we can use our data to actually get a much more, especially low carbon built environment as well. And I think that's been key as well. And as we go beyond what was Level 2 BIM.
So when you say natural built environment, what do you mean by that? What does that refer to? Yeah,
so I always think, we've got multiple layers from our social built environment, our buildings, our linear infrastructure. But, we think in terms of everything we've got from, I'll give you a practical example for me, I live in Scotland, we've got lots of, forests around there. Now we've got to think about how we use these and actually things, what happens if we want to move to, say, much more timber-based procurement using, say, cross-laminated timber? What does that mean in a digital context, especially in carbon within there? So if we think much more holistically about the data around about our natural built environment and how we use that, the impact of what we do, I think that's hugely important as well. It's not just about the buildings. Think about all the different materials, as we're all the things we're doing. Think about, especially in Scotland, renewable energy within there. We've got to think much more holistically. Now, to do that, it means we're having to share data better as well. I think it's obviously a big part of the Centre for Digital Build Britain programme is just trying to create an information management framework. BIM Level 2, as it was back then, was very much probably looking at data and digital at a project level. And we're now thinking of much more about federation and moving to that world of integration where we can bring data sets together. And of course, we're trying to overcome the challenges of interoperability to do that. And
that's quite a big hurdle and challenge, everywhere across all sectors, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the big thing as well is as we come into a new financial year, I've personally seen a lot of clients now thinking about the RMI marketplace, the repair, maintain, improve, and deep retro. So that's asking the question, how do we use digital and data to actually do better with the built assets we already have? Now, to do that, we have to think much more about linking data sets together, that unification of data. And that's often using legacy systems. It might be asset registry systems, it might be computer-assisted facilities management systems. That some of them have been, as I use the term, homebrewed. They maybe built it themselves, set off an MS-DOS system, and REST APIs and web services aren't there yet. So I think interoperability is one of our biggest challenges. But at the same time, I think we're seeing clients with, real appetite to actually bring these sets together within there. And the work that's going on with ontologies and such like is hugely important, I think, to actually make this transformational leap from project to program to enterprise integration and cross-sector integration as well with data.
And the other thing that you already touched upon was digital twins. Now, some may have already become bored with the term. I've heard people say they're frustrated with hearing about the concept constantly within our sector. Others are really excited about the topic. So how likely are we to succeed in this transition that you talked about, going from BIM to digital twin? And do you envisage it may suffer from similar challenges that we first had with BIM adoption?
Yeah, it's like anything, isn't it? Anytime we generally get a new concept within there, it can be a bit overplayed at times. People try to jump and say, "Oh, let's forget about our foundational piece and let's jump to digital twinning." So for me, as we think about digital twins, I think BIM is a hugely important part of it. Let's be honest, there's no point in connecting dynamic data to something that is bad quality data anyway. So BIM, for me, is hugely important. And getting good quality data to actually connect to that digital representation that we now want to connect to is hugely important. Now, for me, if you like, there's a scalability about what digital twins are. And it's back to proportionality. So for a client, you might want to just to be able actually to view, data points, if you like, dynamic data from a sensor or from a BMS system, to actually maybe having, if you like, a bi-directional link that maybe for an actuator you can actually do within there as well. For me, digital twinning is undoubtedly where we're going to. As you know yourself, I mean, I think it's a simple case that we're probably forging new relationships with our built environment, our technologies within there. And I think it's inevitable that we will start to create that sort of cyber physical environment. We blur the lines between the physical and digital. And I think what was BIM Level 2, now the UK BIM framework, is that foundational piece for our digital twins. I also think we need to shine more light on the Gemini principles as well. Because I think if we build anything, we need to have, if you like, a consensus document that's got our values and behaviours as to what we're going to do it. Plus, it also puts a focus on why. There's no point in creating digital twins if we don't have a clear use case.
Yeah.
Look, now, why do I think digital twins are exciting? And I started my career as a young sort of construction engineer, construction manager from there. And for me, it was about how do we build better, faster, better quality? Then PFI came in. I started to think about, how do we start to think about now using data for, the operational better plan preventative maintenance? And then part of that time, as we're doing PPP, there was a realization, I think, actually why I started my career I wanted to get better outcomes. I wanted to, a realization that our built environment actually, if we get it right, it's either a brake on society or an accelerator, isn't it? If we can build better quality hospitals, we might actually get better patient recovery. We might get better clinical excellence. We might get better infection control. And there was suddenly a realization, if we could start to get better data about how our assets perform through digital twinning, actually, this is why I wanted to do it. I wanted to get better societal value from there. So for me, the bits, it's back to that constellation. We've got BIM there as a good quality digital representation. We've got soft landings that's focusing on outcomes, performance, and the end user needs, the voice of the end user within there. And suddenly, through digital twinning, we can start to think about dynamic data sets that are going to give us real-time data and analytics as to how an asset's performing and getting that refinement, the health checks if there. But we've got to think more and more, I think, about actually how do we go beyond operation. I think about performance in terms of organizational, if that's educational, if it's to do with pedagogy, or if it's to do with clinical excellence. We need to really focus. Now that brings different dynamics into our built environment, doesn't it? Absolutely. We're now dealing with surgeons, we're dealing with medical. Let's say we're doing a digital twin of a hospital. To get that right, we've got to now back to integration. We've got to integrate with healthcare informatics, not just the construction data, but actually the patient data, the patient flows. We've got to think about how we can link the other data sets and maybe look at if a patient's going to be coming out, is there the residence, is it fit for them to go to for recovery within there? Is a social one? So suddenly it becomes a much more digital ecosystem. We've got to connect all these on. So I think it's a very exciting period as we go through. So yeah, personally, digital twins excites me. And I think it probably don't think so much about the term digital twin. It's the whole industry 4.0 that we're now moving into rather than just digital twins. It's all these convergence of lots of themes.
Yeah, some people refer to it as construction 4.0. It's like our own interpretation of the industry 4.0 agenda. But one thing that I did want to touch upon is, do you also then envisage that it may start out with the similar challenges as BIM did, which is who pays for it? Who owns the data and the twin, as we might have already seen at the start of BIM, where we had the challenge of who pays and funds the implementation of BIM, and then the questioning of who owns the data. So do you envisage similar challenges or even more exacerbated challenges associated with that?
So let's go back, because I think we can always get some cues from history, can't we? So back to BIM Level 2, the Government Construction Strategy 2011-2016 was very much about procurement reform. How does a client become better at buying data, getting it into their business case? And I think that's one of the things that we need to do with when we think about digital twinning, is to get it into the business case. Now, the construction playbook and such like the work that TIP and the Transforming Infrastructure Performance team is doing, I think is really going to help it. Government gets this, but we need to bake it into, the business case. So you can be 4 or 5 years before you can get to a point of procurement in any design work. So we have to make sure that clients understand the value proposition. They put it in at the earliest stage of the strategic outline case. They bake it through their business case within there as well. Because it is different. You think about it. So there could be some additional cost in terms of capital expenditure, because in terms of, say, operational networks, we're maybe moving from, different sort of federated ones from our BMS and such like to something that's much more integrated operational networks. Now, that could have a capital cost. Once we get into facilities in the operational cycle, we're maybe thinking about curating a dynamic data set and a data lake for 30 years, which might have a cost from there, but more than likely we're going to have better asset management for the UCID one. But here's the big part. We're going to get right downstream back to what we're talking about, our social budget. Think about how we can transform that. But most time, folk that are looking through an optic of capital aren't looking way downstream. It's my little part of the piggy bank. Same with those in operation. So we now have to change, I think, to make this work. That, again, that partnership in terms of very much not just whole life TOTEX costs, but starting to think about the service provision, the big circle that actually if we can improve society. So it really needs, in my view, to get the transformational is procurement reform that's more outcome driven. It's servitization, as we do with other parts of our daily lives now, isn't it? We servitize so much, but so I think we need a radical rethink if we're really going to make digital twins work. We can tinker with it. We can get a dynamic, how's a pump running over 24 hours? You can see data. Yeah, that's great, but it's not transformative, is it? To get this side to, we've got to think about new behaviours, and indeed, I think new procurement that's outcome based to really make it work. So we need that perfect storm.
So there are, as you already covered and mentioned some of these topics, but we have modern methods of construction, offsite manufacturing, digital twins. There's also talk of paired with data, also the use of AI. A lot of exciting technologies and concepts are entering the built environment, or they have been for some time, but it seems like we're kind of really ramping it up now. So all of these push the conversation beyond BIM in many ways. What technologies or innovations are you particularly most interested in or keen to look forward to in our industry?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy technology within there. But the bit that really excites me is, I think it's how these things converge. It's that convergence of all these, creating a new DNA for a built environment. The bit I'm also interested is the move to advanced manufacture and modern methods of construction. I think, as our data sets, we get that golden thread of data that can run through into, if you like, a robotic landscape within there. I think is going to be really transformative within there. We're starting to see, especially out in the US, what that data flow can look like, how you can very quickly configure within there as well. And I think for me, it's going to help improve the efficiency of our sector, but also in terms of quality within there. But really, I think that for me, the cool part about it is it's going to attract many new entrants into a sector. It's going to make it much more diverse. If you're doing a career in, say, robotics, computer science, actually our built environment is going to be somewhere you want to come to do it, because we are doing these cool things that are changing society within there. So for me, that they're all exciting, but the world into MMC, advanced manufacture work streams, and how our data flow moves into it, I think is going to be really quite game changing. And I think for me, we'll see young people go, wow, that's a cool sector. It's not Bob the Builder. This is a place for me that it's diverse, it's innovative, and that's where I'd want to come and start a career. So I think to me that's the bit that kind of excites as well. And we are seeing, I'm lucky enough up in Scotland, not far from where I stay, we've got Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, almost a 40,000 square foot innovation factory filled with robotics and cool things that is really transforming a sector, and indeed, I think, set to transform our nation as well. So, yeah, it excites me.
Yeah, and I think lastly, for a little bit of inspiration for researchers and entrepreneurs in this field, what advice would you give to them, especially when trying to create impactful change? Because change has been so difficult in the built environment. What's your piece of advice from what you've seen and witnessed in the industry so far?
For me, it always comes back to purpose, having a very clear purpose. And I think, as I went through my career, the bit especially in the last couple is taking a much more design thinking approach within there. Really understanding, and I think we try and jump to then goal sort of thing in terms of how, without really understanding why. So I think for me, really understanding the challenges that our customers or the supply chain, our clients actually face, really understanding what the problem we're trying to solve is hugely important. And often, if you like, less is more. We often do too much. If you got a big report, is that going to give you impact? Often, sometimes that it's tools that are dynamic in nature. Might even be a simple business canvas within there, but giving people things that are practical in terms of the everyday with there, but understanding the challenge. Actually getting and speaking to one of the things that I know I do is I go out there and speak to the people at the end goal. It's maybe a facilities manager. Go, hey, can I spend a day with you? And actually see what your challenges are within there and how the use of data can actually help you in your day job. So actually going down and meeting that end user. It might be a patient in a hospital, what's their pathway look like? How can we improve it? So really relentlessly trying to understand, if you like, the challenge and the why, and then taking very much, if you like, a very agile approach to problem solving rather than the sort of traditional waterfall. And don't be afraid to fail, but fail fast if you are going to do it as well. But have fun as well. I think we can. In fact, we're doing exciting things. Collaboration and that. If it's not fun, then do you want to do it? And I think I look back in my career, and I think the last 10 years have actually been the most fun because we're doing cool stuff. We are collaborating. We're trying to bring industry together within there. I think we want to be the vanguard of this, but have fun with it as well. Enjoy it, get people excited, and say, "Gosh, we are doing amazing stuff." I think we don't often shout about how well we are doing. I mean, I'm amazed by how much we've came in the last 10 years, and that's not just from a technology, but the partnerships we've forged between industry, supply chain, academia has been incredible. And I think our research has played a huge part within there as well. But we must make sure that the research, as you said, creates impact. And, how do you do that? Well, it's impact pipelines. It's about having, these understanding, I think, if you like, the theory of change, how we can go from research to actually creating that. What does that look like in terms of how can it influence procurement? How can it influence policy within there? And it's important we can think about what these pathways look like as at the early start. Create an impact plan.
And finally, a heartfelt thank you to all of our followers who have been with us so far. If you enjoyed this episode, then please follow us on LinkedIn or YouTube. And better yet, share this episode with your friends and colleagues.